Hey everybody, it's Norm from Tested.
And it's Jeremy from Tested.
Welcome to the new episode of Projections, our show about virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality. When we first got the Oculus DK1 and we were trying out all sorts of demos, one of the games that we were kind of afraid to play was Dread Halls.
Did you play it?
I did. I played it for the Gear VR.
More than I can say.
Yeah.
Scary games have been around since seems like the very earliest days of VR, and they've been a staple ever since. But although for me, personally, they might as well be urban myths, because I don't play those games. I know I can't handle it.
Why is that? What is it about a horror game or scary game that is amplified in virtual reality?
Well, I think it's all about that presence aspect when you're playing a scary game on a two-dimensional monitor, which, by the way, is a rare thing for me to begin with. I mean, there's a handful. I feel like Alone in the Dark kind of started that whole genre. There was Clive Barker's Undying, which was terrifying for me. But when it gets to like Silent Hill, I don't bother with those because they are quite frightening. But once you are pushed into that space, and those monsters have the ability to cross that threshold into my personal space, no thank you. I can't handle that kind of thing. You?
There's some things I can and can't handle. I think that you're absolutely right. When you feel present in a virtual environment, even if the game doesn't employ tactics like jump scares, just having no music, just feeling alone, your brain fills in your imagination, makes it scary because you can't turn away.
That's it. And by the way, you are actually blindfolded to the real world. So that while you're playing a regular two-dimensional game or even watching a movie, you can still look around. If you get actually a little bit frightened, you can see, is there somebody lurking in my room? VR headset keeps you from doing that.
And a lot of developers have used the immersive environment to break the rules of the real world for even scarier experiences. They know where you're looking. Because they know where you're looking, they can program things like things popping up in mirrors, or you look in a doorway and you turn around and you turn back and then someone's there.
That's right.
They can use your directional, the position, to activate cues and trigger events in the game.
I gotta tell you, there's even a Disney app on the App Store, which is Disney Movies VR. One of the experiences in there is not a 360 video, it's a three-dimensional rendered scene from The Jungle Book, where the snake, Scarlett Johansson, slithers down the tree and comes into your face, and her eyes start to do this psychedelic thing. And she gets closer and closer. I noped right out of that. Like, it just got, like, I didn't know if that snake was gonna jump at me or what. I don't know how that scene ends, Norm.
And now you also mentioned personal space, the invasion of personal space. And there are a lot of experiences out there which may not be on its face a horror or scary experience, but you still feel that same tension because the creatures or the characters invade your personal space and get up close to you. Even a game like Serious Sam, for example, it's an action game, but because the enemies run at you and they can run right up to you, your lizard brain knows it's not going to actually knock you over, but with the combination of the sound and the visuals, there's tension.
I would say that the lizard brain thinks it will, and that's why it's terrifying. And it's my logical brain that knows that it won't, but my logical brain is not in charge in VR. That's part of the problem. And like Raw Data is another example of a game that does that, where the enemies keep coming at you. Personally, I like games that keep them at bay a little bit, like Space Pirate Trainer is a good one where they fly close enough to you that you feel immersed, but there's a certain amount of distance that respects personal space. I mean, that boundary is something that VR gets to play with in a way that no other genre gets to play with. And it's to their benefit, because a lot of people want that experience. You know, a lot of people like slasher films and horrifying, movies. Why not? I mean, obviously there's a market for these games as well, and this is beyond any level of scare that I think you can get anywhere else.
And one of the best examples, perhaps, of a horror game and a scary game in VR is Resident Evil 7 for PSVR, which a lot of people prefer playing with PSVR rather than on a flat screen because you can't look away and has a strong narrative. You have to be in that game for hours and hours at a time, not only having all the sensory information that the developer is putting in, but also that imagination that you bring to the game. Long-form narrative horror experiences it's going to be a genre for VR.
Absolutely.
And
it might be for people like me, it's going to remain a genre that I don't play. So it is going to have to remain niche. However, I think sort of like movies, the budget for these games doesn't have to be astronomical. I think they can be very successful with limited resources.
And one of the developers working on a long-form narrative horror game is Twisted Pixel. Their new game is Olsens Heart, which is actually coming out next month on the Oculus platform. We got to play about 45 minutes of the game at a recent event and chat with the developers about how they're making a horror game, a long-form narrative horror game for VR. So let's go check that out.
Olsens Heart is a first-person psychological thriller, and we have it set in a 1940s black and white horror film. So it's very narrative-driven.
So a narrative-driven VR game that's horror-based.
Yes.
Influences include things like Twilight Zone?
Yes, definitely Twilight Zone. We also pull a lot from the classic Universal monster movies and things like that. So you are a character named Wilson, Robert Wilson, which is voiced by Peter Weller of the RoboCop Peter Wellers, and we really love his voice. So you start the game and you're tied to a chair and you're restrained by the wrist, and what you don't realize is that you've just been the victim of an unconsented heart transplant, and the new device that they've put in to replace your heart has magical abilities. So on towards into the gameplay, you can start pulling out this orb, and you can use it to kill enemies or to do magical abilities and stuff like that. So basically it's a narrative-driven game, so you're moving around and you're solving puzzles and mysteries and you're meeting new cast members. So the idea is to be more like an immersive experience where you're actually in the world experiencing it, like through a first-person point of view.
So that world, it seems like it's a mental institution. It's a hospital.
Yes.
Right? And how much of that world is built out and how much do you get to explore?
Oh, so much. What you see in the demos is a very tiny sliver. If you have played through several times and you know every single mystery and every single clue, it'll still take you 8 hours to get through the game. So, I mean, if you don't know anything and it's your first time, it is completely expansive. I mean, you can sit there and just spend forever in there.
When you guys first started out writing the game, did you design it wanting it to be a new type of interactive VR experience, or did you write the story out first? What was it?
Yeah, actually, we had always wanted to do a first-person psychological thriller, and we had actually done it first in 2D. We didn't make the whole game, but there was some components. The Wilson character had already been built, and it wasn't until in 2015, we got some touch prototypes, and we were able to, fool around with those, and we're like, oh my God, Wilson has found its home, and then at that point, Oculus became involved, and we just decided this needed to be a virtual reality experience. So no, it wasn't originally conceived that way, but it became that way, and when it did, we just everything clicked and everything fell into place. Somehow subconsciously, it was always meant to be that way.
So playing the demo, I definitely see a lot of adventure game elements in there, collecting items, using items. What's the balance in this game between adventuring, puzzle solving, combat, and just story?
It's really more narrative based, I would say. There's a lot of puzzle solving and mysteries and that sort of thing. But as you go further into the game, you do more hand-to-hand combat, magical abilities, that sort of thing. But we try and balance everything as best as we can to keep everyone completely immersed.
In terms of it being a horror game, when you're in VR, you can feel very claustrophobic. There's a lot, every little sound, every little visual cue can be used for tension and horror. How is that put to effect in Olsens Heart?
Well, originally, when the Oculus first came out and a lot of other VR consoles as well, people were saying, oh my goodness, like if I can move around freely, like I might get nauseous, I might get claustrophobic, like there's a lot of things. That's why we decided to use like our locomotion to be teleportation based. So what we do to kind of keep people from getting too claustrophobic is just saying, okay, here you are in this space, and you see these little silhouettes as different options that you can move, and you can say, oh, I'm going to go there. You teleport there, and that way our designers know, okay, this is exactly where they're going to be standing. We're going to go ahead and like build everything around that space, and that way the physics can be perfect because we know exactly where they are. And also, you're not just like running into tables and getting nauseous because you stay within a 1 meter by 1 meter space.
Do you guys ever do jump scares behind you?
Yes.
What level of scare?
Yes, it gets pretty scary. We do all kinds of jump scares. There'll be things like, oh, you open a cabinet and something will pop out, or zombies will run at you, or there'll be little things where you look up and it's like, oh my goodness. We don't want to make it too scary though. We don't want like people to have nightmares or anything like that. But the idea is for it to be a fun experience, but at the same time sort of keeps you on your toes.
And I also noticed that the world kind of transforms around you.
Yes.
Like there were a lot of rules that were broken. Like you can open a door and suddenly the door's a brick wall. Is that part of that creepy storytelling?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we want everything to just sort of like, oh my goodness, it's disorienting. There'll be times where like you have a crowbar and you let it go and all of a sudden gravity is not there anymore and it'll just float to the ceiling. We want to keep people guessing and keep people on their toes.
Okay, Jeremy, what did you think about that?
Well, we both played it, and I quite enjoyed it. This is the first time I played it. You played it last E3,
yeah,
right?
yes.
So I played what you played then, and then I played the second demo, which you got yesterday. I was, first of all, I was intrigued by the black and white aspect of this game, and I was curious, do they only show black and white in the trailers, but there's actually a color aspect to it? No.
No, I asked her very explicitly, and she said the whole game is in black and white. And I was surprised how quickly my brain adapted to that environment. It was like I didn't want any color. I was okay with that being the noir style.
I love that about VR. I love that you can be thrown into a black and white world and it feels just as real.
It's Pleasantville.
Yeah.
Except for this one, a little more horrific.
It's super cool, and the black and white aspect it works really well because it does become more about the shadows, and you do feel like you're in a noir film or a Twilight Zone. And I think that they walk this line of scary for me quite well. They've thought about this quite a lot. They don't want to scare too many people away from this game, but they do want to make it Twilight Zone spooky.
A lot of that, I think, has to do with the way you get around the world. So the world of the game is supposed to be this massive psychiatric world. It is haunted, so rules are broken, doors are suddenly there, suddenly not there.
Is it haunted or am I insane?
Right, we don't know. Right. You have to play the whole game, right? But because of the way you get around this world is teleporting to nodes. I look at a spot, I look at a door, and I see a silhouette, a glowing silhouette of my character. That tells me that when I teleport there, I'm not going to have maybe a jump scare behind me. Everything that's going to happen around me is going to be in front of me. So it quickly sets the expectation that your focus is supposed to be in front of you. And while you may look around, you're never going to feel too claustrophobic.
Right. The movement mechanic is just like Article 1, which is a demo that we played at the last Oculus event. I have mixed feelings about that movement mechanic. It has the upside of they get to tailor every single node perfectly to that exact spot. And there's a lot of animations that unfold once you get there.
And they also get to direct your attention, because some of those spots don't even unlock until you've solved the puzzle or activated a certain thing. So they get to move the narrative forward by you looking around. Oh, okay, that silhouette wasn't there before until I pulled this lever. I guess that's where I'm supposed to teleport to next.
Right. On the other hand, though, I feel like for an immersion level, it would be nice if I could really explore that space. Maybe not even with a free walking thing, but maybe more with a Robo Recall style movement. That game does a good job of letting you go anywhere you want and then occasionally requiring you go to one spot. I think that's a good compromise. I would be curious to see that incorporated into this game. However, like I said, they're tailoring all the nodes, so who knows if that's an easy thing to do or not.
Right, and because they're tailoring the nodes, when you teleport to a spot, all the interactivity can be focused, whether whether it's using a faucet, opening a mirror,
Right.
pulling open a door.
Everything's within reach.
Everything is absolutely within reach. And if they let me freely explore the space by teleporting, I feel like it would be tough for them to focus my attention toward the puzzles. You know, they could have a vast environment, but if I didn't know I was supposed to go to that corner, find that key, open this locker, I could spend 45 minutes just looking at things, which would feel immersive, but it would break the pacing of the story.
Yeah, I'm not as concerned about that as you are. I actually wish that I had more time to take my time and explore and really investigate and get close to everything. One of the things that I was surprised by was I talked to the developers while you were playing, and the resources required for this game had no effect. The fact that it was in black and white had no effect on the cost of developing the assets for this game, because all the detail is still there. Right. All of it has just as much texture. Everything's just as high res as they can make them. It just happens to be all shades of gray. You know, just because there aren't colors in there doesn't mean that it didn't take quite a lot of time. There's not quite a lot of detail on every single object in that game.
I would say from a creative standpoint, having that constraint of just grayscale probably makes it more challenging for them to focus your attention. They can't have a glowing red light to say, move here, or look over here and then have a monster come out.
Right.
It's all like the palette is limited.
Most things that you can engage with in this game highlight.
Yes.
They become white.
Yeah.
Not everything,
Yeah.
but most things.
So the basic mechanics, right? You have a story. They want to really tell this 7 to 8 hour story.
Right.
There are puzzles, which I like. There's one puzzle that we both played where you have to rotate a room upside down to get access to certain parts of the room. And then there's combat. And
that struck me as odd.
Yeah.
Because the first chapter that I played, the one you played last year, no combat. It's just key finding, door opening, suspense, a little bit of scary. But then you're saying halfway through this next chapter, there's a completely new combat mechanic.
Right.
And it involves taking your heart and throwing it, and then you can direct it almost like as a force power, which is actually, it's kind of fun.
It's very fun.
It just felt like a different game.
Yeah, right. And so the pacing between puzzles, narrative story with voice acting, with lots of writing, and then also combat, having those elements work in tandem and to keep you engrossed if you're going to be playing for a 2-hour session or an hour-long session, that's not easy. I'm not convinced yet that they got it right based on just the 45 minutes we played. We were given some clues. We had developers standing next to us telling us to try this thing, try that thing.
Right.
So we didn't have the pure experience. And I think if we did, it definitely feels like a game I want to play alone. I want to play solitary alone and feel immersed in that world.
You're a braver man than I am. I think I want to play this game, but I would much rather play it with somebody sitting in the room with me, someone I trust. Somebody's not going to jump up and grab me by my shoulders. There's a lot of, they like I said, they handle scary well, but it's all about suspense. It really feels like a Twilight Zone.
It's suspense and tension more than it is
jump
horror
scares,
and jump scares.
Although there is a moment where the screen goes black and a second later comes up, there's somebody right in front of you. They do that, but it's well done and it's used sparingly.
And I'm glad that they're not relying solely on jump scares.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I think they rely on your attention to detail, where you can look at a corpse in the game, look away and look back, and the corpse is suddenly in a different position. And those subtle things, the differences in the way the world changes around you based on where you're looking, that creates the suspense, I think.
Yeah, it's an 8-hour game. I don't imagine many people will be playing this in one fell swoop. There's a lot of content in there. And we were talking about this is the year of depth, and this is we haven't had too many of these long-form single-player games. So I'm glad that this is coming simply for that aspect. We need more of that.
Yeah, so Olsens Heart, it comes out next month, end of April. Will be in the Oculus store. But when we come back, a game that we've been playing that's available out now. But first, this.
How y'all doing? How you doing? How you doing?
Just give me a nod when you're ready to go.
Okay.
Okay, Jeremy, our spotlight this week is in another single-player experience that leaves you feeling isolated as well, but it's not horror at all. It's actually a science education demo. It is Mission ISS.
This is great, man. I'm really glad that they did this. So Oculus partnered with NASA.
NASA and Canadian Space Agency.
Oh, really? Were they part of it
yes, to recreate in VR the International Space Station.
Now, this could have very easily been done wrong, right? This could have so easily been 360 videos where you click and they play a video for you to transition, or maybe you just even like teleport to another 360 environment. You know, photogrammetry. I mean, that would have been cool, but they did it right. Like, they really went the extra mile, and this is completely 3D modeled, and you can move freely in 0G throughout this space station.
And the 0G movement in the space station is perfectly suited for VR with motion controllers.
Yes.
Where, like a game like Climby or The Climb or even the Lone Echo demo, 0G grabbing onto things, using momentum. You do have like rocket thruster controls, which are not realistic, but you get to float around the International Space Station. And even more impressively, as opposed to just being a sandbox where you can just look at things, there are actually missions you can do. They programmed and scripted in scenarios where you are docking capsules, you are going on spacewalks outside the space station. I think they're trying to give you the astronaut simulator experience. Now, when Jason Rubin, when they announced this game, he said this is very similar to what NASA already uses to train its astronauts.
They do have a VR lab.
They do have a VR lab. They also, at Johnson Space Center, have a mock-up of the ISS. A couple years ago, Will and I actually went to JSC and we walked through that mock-up, which is, it's not fully laid out. It's more, you know, fake painted walls, and there are gaps between the modules. Being in the virtual version of the ISS, I felt was much more compelling. And the takeaway I took was that it's a cramped, small space.
That's it, isn't it? I mean, I romanticize the ISS because of the Chris Hadfield videos, you know, up there singing songs on the guitar, doing great videos, footage, you know, seeing water in 0G and fire and this kind of thing. It's a lot of fun to see that stuff.
And when you watch the videos or even look at photos of astronauts taking the ISS, it's with wide-angle lenses.
Right.
They show you one wall or one corner, and you don't really have a sense of how these walls are connected or how much space or how much, you know, actual physical space there is. But in here,
I'm imagining that there's rooms everywhere. You know, there's hallways and a bathroom and privacy wherever you want.
Even if you look at a topographical map, if you look at a blueprint of the ISS, you don't get a sense that, well, it's actually only 100 feet from here to there.
Like 2 corridors, and that's it.
That's it.
And you can explore all of that in this app. And I totally agree with you. Like, I really had a sense for the limited amount of space that they have up there.
Yeah.
And how wonderful that one bay window is. Because
The cupola.
It's like your little umbilical visually to the outer space and, you know, the planet down beneath you.
What I really wanted out of this experience, though, was some type of social interaction.
Oh, that'd
I
be
felt
great.
Really, really alone.
And that's the wonderful thing about Lone Echo that I keep harping on is that multiplayer experience. Playing with other people in 0G is a blast.
Yeah.
I would love to do that. How many astronauts fit on the ISS? Do you know how many they have up there at a time? Maybe 5?
Yeah, it's just a handful.
It'd be fun. Like, that's a perfect number. I mean, it'd be fun to be able to do that with multiple people.
Right, so I don't know if they'll actually do this, but we'd love to in the future see a version of this where we could have 2 or 3 people hang out and see if we could be hanging out in there for an hour or 2.
Yeah, or maybe accomplishing tasks. You know, we're all on microphones and controls and doing spacewalks. That would be kind of fun.
Yeah. Well, the neat thing is Mission ISS is free in the Oculus Store.
That's cool.
And they actually have an Oculus headset up on the International Space Station right now.
I hope they're not using the ISS VR app on the space station. That would be a little recursive.
A little weird.
Yeah.
Well, it's fun to check out. You guys should absolutely check that out. And we'll be back next week with more spotlights, more interviews, and more talk about VR mechanics. Until then, please like the video, subscribe to our channel, and Jeremy and I will see you next time.
Bye.